The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Williams. Thank you so much for joining our lab today. We're going to be talking about the scheduler from a front-end perspective. Before we really get into anything, if you guys could, you know the drill, type a Y or a yes into the questions pane. Make sure you can hear me and see my screen. You should see a cover slide, Exago Support Lab, the scheduler. Awesome. All right, great. So welcome again, everybody. Thanks so much for attending. If you're listening to the recording, thank you so much for tuning in. I do have my colleague Travis McGrath here to handle questions. So if you do have questions at any point throughout the presentation, please feel free, post in the questions pane. Travis will get back to you privately, and if it's a good question for the group, we'll be sure to read it out loud and address it on screen. All right. So we did just host a lab last month about the scheduler queue. We also have an existing lab about scheduler configuration, so putting together the setup on the back end, both of which will be linked on the support site from the article where this video will be hosted later on today or tomorrow. Today's video is really going to be end user focused, though. You may have watched our existing front end scheduler lab since that one was recorded just about 2 years to the day ago today, all the way back in version 2018.1 of Exago. We decided to give the recording a little facelift as well as include a little bit of new information. Now, the new points specifically are going to center around scheduling dashboards. We have a couple new options in the scheduling wizard, a test email button, as well as a reply to field. Another quick disclaimer before we get into the content here. You might not have access to some of the components that I'm showing you today as they are configurable on the administrative side of Exago. So if you do have any questions, if you're not seeing some of the parts and pieces or they're not working for you as described and shown on the demonstration today, feel free to just reach out to your system admin. If they need to come talk to us, they are always welcome. Great. So on screen, you should see the PowerPoint with a quick overview of today's high-level content. We're going to spend most of the time today in the application. We'll start with a review of the capabilities of the scheduler in sending direct emails, as well as the wizard that can be used to configure recurrence patterns. We're going to use it first to schedule a dashboard. Now, this will also include an overview of that test email button now present in the wizard as of version 2019.2 of Exago, as well as the reply to field, which is new as of version 2018.2. We will then demonstrate using the scheduler manager to modify existing schedules and view the status of jobs. At that point, we'll walk through the option to set up a batch schedule, which is perhaps the most exciting part of today's presentation. And along the way, we'll discuss the options to edit filters on change reports. That feature was added in 2018.2. And then, of course, emailing dashboards also added in 18.2. I'll come back to this at the end of the presentation today, but I just want to mention that we have a really fancy 4-part series next month on storage management. We have a pretty big new feature coming out. We're all really excited about it. So we're putting together a series of labs to bring some content to you guys. The first will be on the 14th. That'll be an overview of storage management. On the 16th, we'll have migration details. On the 21st, we'll go over permissioning. And then on the 23rd, we'll talk about customization. So please feel free to tune into all of those for some really good content there. And as always, they'll be recorded, so you can always catch a version afterwards. Great. So I'm going to hop into the local instance of Exago to get going on today's content. Let's first take a look at the reports we'll be using today. I have 2 pretty simple reports. They all deal with employee sales data, and for simplicity's sake, I've limited this to just 2 reports. Employee sales is the first. This returns just a chart summarized by each employee that's just showing a count of orders. The second is employee revenue, which does have a prompting filter. This will come into play in just a bit. And this is just a tabular output that shows a summary of revenue for each employee with some detail rows as well. We've kept the reports pretty simple for today because the focus of the lab is really on the scheduler component, so I didn't want overly complex reports to detract from the main topics at hand today. Great. So the first way that we can use the scheduler to send reports is via what we call the hamburger menu in the report tree. If I click on the little menu, you'll see the option to email a report. I can input an address into the free type box here. I can choose an export type. Now, this is going to execute the report right away, and the scheduler is going to attach the report to the email in your chosen export format. So this is a one-time function. It does not repeat or give the option to configure a recurrence pattern. This means it's going to send the report with the data as of the time that it's executed, just like running the report directly without using a scheduler. Now, once I click a type here, the little dialog box will let me know that that report will be emailed as soon as it's completed. This is the most simple option available for sending a report to someone. Next, we can use the scheduler wizard to open up some additional options in configuring this job. So I'm going to use the dashboard this time. Now I'll run it to HTML first just to show you guys what it is. Quite literally, I've taken both of those reports that I showed you and put them on a dashboard. So really, I just want to illustrate how we can use the scheduler now to email a dashboard and maybe a dashboard that's more complex than this one. But again, I don't want to over complicate the report content and really focus on the scheduler. So I'm going to start with that hamburger menu again, and I'll go to the schedule report option this time. This opens me up into the wizard. The first thing I can do is give the schedule a name. So this name is going to show up in my scheduler manager, which we'll go to in just a moment. I'll call this one employee sales, maybe employee sales reports. Now again, I can choose an export type. And for PDF and Excel, I can actually password protect the output. So let's do this today so that I can show you on the receiving end. We've got the email inbox that we're going to be sending everything to up here. So we'll be able to really see what these look like once they are sent. Now, the first option that we have here is to execute the scheduled job immediately. Execute immediately is very similar to the option that I just showed you from the report tree. We're going to actually choose this for all of our reports today so that we can visualize the output on the receiving end. But I will talk through the other options that are below here. So the first is the ability to set a time for the first execution. And then, of course, we have the option to set a repeat, a time-based recurrence pattern. So executions can happen multiple times throughout the same day using this option. Down below, we can set up a pattern to execute over multiple days, weeks, months, or years using the pattern options below. You'll notice that as I change the option selected on the left here, my UI will change on the right as there are different patterns that you might want based on your first selection here. And then we can choose a range of recurrence. So if we pick a start date, we can choose that we don't have an end date. So that report, that scheduled job will execute on our pattern forever. Or we can choose a number of occurrences. So execute on this pattern for a total of 10 occurrences and then stop, and finally choose an end date. So you don't need to calculate the number of times that you want it to execute. Just run on this pattern from today until 6 months from now, something like that. We're going to go with execute immediately for today, like I mentioned. Now on a dashboard or a change report, we will have the option to work with prompting filters. So I ran that employee revenue report and showed you the prompting filter earlier because it is relevant here. I have the option to change the values or the operator. It shows me on the right which report this filter corresponds to. So that can be super helpful and is a feature new to the last lab that we had. So I wanted to point it out here. I'm going to schedule a report that is not a composite report, so not a dashboard or a change report in just a bit, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We're going to skip the batch tab for now, but when I run the regular report using the scheduler in a little bit, we'll set up a batch job and walk through these options, so just stay tuned. Finally, the Recipients tab has quite a few options, but they're all pretty straightforward. I'm going to walk through them one by one here. So we first have the option of setting two CC and BCC recipients. If we have more than one, we can separate them with semicolons to build a list. In your implementation, you might also have the ability to use distribution groups as your recipients. So please feel free to reach out to your admin if you're not sure if that configuration is set up for you. Today, we're going to use that same dummy email that I mentioned before. Now, moving down the list, the reply to field is a newer setting. It lets me specify an email address to be used if the recipient wants to reply to the email that contains the report, and we'll send that response to the address applied in this field. So I might use my personal email if I'm setting this up, my work email that is, so that I get any responses from the recipient, or potentially an internal distribution group so that multiple people can see it if there's a problem with the email or something like that. The subject and the body are going to be freeform and optional. You might have a default subject and body of your email that your admin has set up, but you still should be able to change them. So in this case, I'll call this employee sales reports. And just include a little message there as well. Now, one of the other settings I wanted to talk about here is the option to send a test email. This button will execute the job immediately. It tests a single occurrence of the schedule. If I click the button, I do get the option to specify any number of test recipients. Again, I can separate a list with a semicolon. This is a really helpful way to check the content and formatting of the email without having to create an immediate execution job and then either modify that job or create a new one for the recurrence pattern that you ultimately want to use with some longevity. This setting is new as of version 2019.2. So this is, if any of them, probably one that might not be present in your implementation. All right, so finally pressing finish on the wizard here will let me know that the report has been scheduled. And when that's all set, it will send the email off to that email inbox. All right, now we're going to pause for questions for a moment, just to make sure that I'm sure Travis is keeping up there, but I'm going to make sure that there's none that are appropriate to read for everyone. And Travis, certainly if you see one that you'd like, you can feel free to
Yeah,
pop
Emma,
in.
a great question came in about time zones, particularly as you schedule a schedule, um, what the time zone is being used and why it's not being displayed, which time zone is shown there. Time zones are handled automatically, and we actually covered this in a past lab, which is recorded. So if you look on our knowledge base, you'll find the time zone lab actually shows how this can be handled.
Cool, thanks Travis, great question. All right, so while the email sends, I'm going to take this time to take a look at the schedule manager. The manager will actually give us a peek at where that scheduled job is in execution process, if it's completed, if it's been sent, all that good stuff. The scheduler manager is located on the bottom of these four icons on the left-hand side of Exago's full UI. If we open it up, we'll see a bunch of test reports that, that I ran earlier today. And of course, the ones that I just ran as well. So this immediate email of the employee sales report is the one I ran earlier. And then you'll see the employee sales reports job is marked completed. It was a one-time execution, and it was the sales dashboard that I ran. So we should see that pop up in the inbox pretty soon. We do see, now both, but before we also saw the immediate execution that I ran. So if I open this up, it's that employee sales report that I mentioned, just the chart here. And it actually has the word immediate appended to the name of the PDF. So I know that that one was sent directly from the report tree, not using the scheduler. You'll notice, not using the wizard. You'll notice that it has no subject, again, because I didn't use the wizard. I didn't give it a subject line. Now the employee sales reports is actually the dashboard that I just emailed, and it says, please see attached reports. This one is password protected, so you'll notice that if I go to open it, I have to enter the password that I configured, and now it'll open my dashboard. Now, as most of you are probably aware, dashboards currently export as chained reports. So this is effectively the same as scheduling a chained report that did not have collation turned on. For both of these reports, I get the chart first and then that detailed report right after. All right. So at this point, let's talk through a couple options in the Scheduler Manager. The manager allows us to view new and existing scheduled jobs. It does have a search bar along the top. So if I wanted to look for the one that I just sent, let's say, I can search through them. We can refresh the view to see if anything has changed. Of course, I haven't done anything since we opened the manager, so it's not going to change there. This flush button will get rid of any deleted or completed schedules. Flush is a bulk delete where the individual X's can remove them line by line. Now we can also modify existing schedules from here. So you'll notice that some of these have a little pen icon that's not grayed out. This is the option to edit it. So I'm going to use that dashboard execution. If I click this, it's going to come right back into my wizard, give me the option to change something. Maybe I want to change a filter value or change the recipients list. There's lots of things that I might edit here. So I can make them sort of reusable. Now, if we do modify a job, we'll see the changes reflected here if we refresh. So a new recurrence pattern, something like that. And then finally, if a schedule fails, we'll see status equals appended. So you can see deleted down at the bottom. I'm going to create one in just a moment, and we will see status ready or running. And that'll show us as it's executing what the manager view looks like. So let's flush these for now so that once we create this batch report, it's really clear which ones we want to look at when we come back in here. Now, I also just gave away the thing we're going to do next. We're going to take a look at batch reporting. And like I said, this is one of my favorite features of this content, the content in this lab. Now, there are certain data requirements to set up this feature. So what I'm going to do is take a report and go to the Schedule Report button to open the wizard. The first steps are very similar to everything that we've done so far. I'm going to again choose to execute it immediately, and I'll call this one batch report. That's really only for our own understanding, so that when we go back to the manager, we can look for this and know which one it is. Now again, I see the prompting filter that is placed on the employee revenue report, but you'll notice that since I'm scheduling a single report at this point, I do have the option to add filters to it. With composite reports, we can't guarantee that filters would be relevant or applicable to both reports. So you have the option to modify existing prompting filters, but not yet to add new filters. That is, of course, different for single reports. So we see that option here. Now we get to the fun part. Let's talk about batch reporting. So first and foremost, I want to explain what batch reporting is. The functionality that batch schedules allow for is emailing each employee, in our case here, only their set of data or the set of data that is associated with their email address. Now, one thing that is a requirement to use batch reporting is the presence of that email address in a table or a data object on the report. We'll then use the unique ID associated with the email field of a single employee, again in Northwind's case, to filter the report. So if I click Run as a batch report here, I still have a To and a CC option, but this is going to describe the results of the completed batch operation. So I might put my work email in here, something like that. You'll see the data category down here at the bottom, and if I open it up, I get all of the relevant data objects. I'm going to open employees in this case, and I have an email data field. Now, I've gone through and associated one of the Northwind employees with our dummy email here today. So let me just run this Express view quick so I can show you which one we expect. exagolabs@gmail.com is associated with Stephen Buchanan, so we should see his data when this batch report executes. The rest of them will go to these dummy addresses. All right. So again, if batch reporting is set up in your environment, if we have the right data structure to support it, it can be very helpful, and leveraging this feature is usually worthwhile, but just keep in mind that it might be turned off simply because the right data structure doesn't exist currently to support it. Now at this point, I'm going to pop over to the Recipients tab and explain the differences here. We, of course, don't have the to, CC, BCC, or reply to options because we just specified the recipients in the batch tab. Right, we're going to use the email addresses in that column of data to send the email to. Again, I can make a subject here, and we'll talk about an option with the body of the email in batch reports in just a moment. That's one of my favorite things about batch reporting here is this option coming up. So let's just call this revenue report. Actually, we can call it your revenue report since it's specific to each employee. And now let's say in the body of the email here, we want to include something personal to each employee, right? We're sending a very specific set of data, a very specific report to each person in this case. So let's say we want it to say, hi, employee name. But I want this to be the specific employee name that's receiving the email, right? I can use what we call a parameter, but it's a parameter specific to batch reporting. So we're going to start it with an @ symbol, just like most all parameters in Exago. And in this case, we'll type batch underscore, and then the column of data that we want to reference. So again, this has to be, this column of data needs to be contained in the data object that the email column is contained in. So in my case, the employee's data object is the one that I have to work with. And it does need to be a column of data, right? So I'm going to use first name here, followed by another @ symbol. This is going to look at the first name column of data in the employees table. Just to reiterate, I can use this because the email column comes from that same data object. Right. So quick recap
Hey,
of,
Emma, a great
yep.
question came in about batch, and specifically how the emails are being used. In a batch email, are the emails sent out as BCC so that a given user doesn't see other recipients, or are they sent as separate emails entirely?
Beautiful. So this is actually, and we'll see this in the schedule manager, but these are going to be sent as separate jobs. It'll create, I believe in our case, 9 separate jobs. So each filter is applied separately to each execution of the report, which eliminates that issue, right? You're not going to see all of the other emails that it's sent to. And we'll be able to visualize that in the manager in just a moment. So that was a perfectly timed question. All right, I think this one is all set up. Just to reiterate, the report does have to contain a data object with a field holding each of the relevant emails that we want to send the report to. That data object's unique ID is used to dynamically filter the report output such that the output is unique to each of the given recipients the report goes to. And then again, if we want to use this parameter option here, the column that we'd like to reference in the parameter also needs to be contained in the same data object as the email column. So we'll press finish here. And now, as promised, we'll come back to our manager. If I refresh this, we'll see first that it's ready, and then we'll start to see them separate out. Great, so here they go. We've got not quite 9 yet, that might be close. And you'll see them start to run and complete. These are very quick jobs because the report's not too crazy. This is good. Great. All right, so they're all completed, and pretty soon we should see the report show up here. Ah, nice. Nice and quick. We see, hi, Steven. So that's that parameter at work. Find your revenue report attached. Have a great day. There's nothing I like more than telling myself to have a great day. Again, we can open up the report. We use PDF again, so this is pretty similar to the info before. But we're only seeing Stephen Buchanan's report. It's only 4 pages long. This report was much longer before when we had all the employees contained on it. All right. So we'll, of course, hang around for a couple more questions. I think it looks like there are a few in there. I just want to first thank you guys all for showing up. This was a fun one for me to put together and always a pleasure to present to everybody. I want to also refresh your memory on the next upcoming labs, because these are really good ones and really important ones. So if you do have any questions on storage management, overview, migration, permissioning, or customization, please tune in on the 14th, 16th, 21st, and 23rd. And of course, you can always catch them at a later date. We host all of the recordings on our support site. The last thing is we do have a survey that you guys will be prompted with when you leave the lab today. We really, really appreciate the feedback. We definitely take it into account when we're planning upcoming labs, and topic suggestions from you guys are where we get all of our ideas. So if you could take the time to fill out that survey, we would really appreciate it. Any feedback on today's lab is great.
Emma, a couple of good questions came in on the other. Sorry, I'm reading questions as I'm trying to read them out loud. One came in. Could you walk through what Flush does in the scheduler manager?
Yep, great. So let's go back to the manager. So we have ready, complete, appended, or deleted statuses here. And running, of course, running is currently executing. So when I click flush, it's going to get rid of any completed or deleted jobs. It shouldn't get rid of anything that has upcoming executions. So if this next execute date has a value filled in, those should remain in your view here. So if I flush now, it's going to remove all of my schedules that are in this menu here, since they are all marked completed. We'll see that happen now. All of the labs are going to be presented at 11 a.m. on Wednesdays, although these upcoming ones are not going to be on all Wednesdays, of course, but they do always start at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Yep. We'll let you guys know if that changes, but that's a pretty safe bet for all labs.
Great. I think there are a few questions that are a little more client specific, so those we'll likely want to follow up with after the lab. And other than that, I think we're good to close it out.
All right, great. Thanks. I haven't gotten through this list of questions, so thanks for the recap there, Travis. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. On behalf of all of us at Exago, hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and we'll catch you next time.